Thank you very much for joining us. In Ghana, many alleged criminals continue to suffer what is referred to as instant justice. Many of them, sometimes innocent, are either gravely humiliated in public or even lynched. One such incident is what happened in Kejetia in the Ashanti region some days ago. In a video, a fair-looking lady is stripped naked and attacked in public over allegations she had stolen. This video up next could be disturbing for some viewers. I'm joined in the studio now by a lawyer, women activist, and also the executive director of ACT Foundation, Angela Dwamena. And ACT Foundation is an NGO that caters for both women and vulnerable children in society. Thank you very much, lawyer, for joining us in the studio.
Thank you, Beatrice.
How do you feel? First of all, your reaction to the video we just watched?
Well, it's tough. I had tears in my eyes. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, that in Ghana in this century, we would have a thing like this happening, and happening to women in such a cruel, barbaric way. It just reminds me of that story of the woman caught in adultery who was brought before the Lord Jesus, and he said, if there's anyone among you who has not sinned, you throw the first stone. I'm not sure that those people who did what they did are innocent. I'm not sure that they're people who live above board, and they have no right, no business doing a thing like this. Nobody has any right to take the law into their own hands. Whether it's a man or a woman they catch doing anything, there are clear rules concerning issues of criminality and how even citizens arrest if they have to. And I am totally scandalized. Honestly, I'm totally scandalized by this.
As a lawyer and someone who's been fighting for women's rights, what goes through your mind after seeing something like this?
Well, one thing, I'm sad because I don't hear the outrage that needs to come out of society. I mean, in the past, maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, there would have been a huge hue and cry from the human rights organizations, the women's rights organizations, civil society, and even well-meaning citizens. I think this thing has been trending, and we are busy discussing everything else, the media, everybody else, and I mean, if this has gotten me out for quite some time, then you can tell that it's really gotten to me. I think also that it's indicative of the fact that we have forgotten that for years and years, we advocated for gender justice, we advocated for ensuring that violence against women and girls is curtailed to a great extent. It seems as if we've left it on the back burner. Yes, we are talking about social protection, we are talking about all manner of things, but the issues around violence, particularly against women, which is endemic, and which is getting more brutal by the day, we have really left it behind.
If you say it is getting more brutal by the day, what have you seen?
What I've seen is that the nature of it, look at something like this, where a woman is stripped. Somebody would say, well, they catch men and they sometimes even beat them to death, which is equally bad, okay? And nobody should ever think that mob justice of any kind should be tolerated. But when it comes to women, this is also set within not just the social justice framework or criminal law framework, but within violence against women, which is completely a human rights issue as well. Look at the manner in which they purported to arrest her, they stripped her, and look at the acts of violence that were perpetrated against her. You can count many of these acts of violence, you know, the assault, the battery, the sexual assault, you know, the indecent assault. You can just keep counting what happened to this woman because somebody thinks she's committed a crime. We have institutions of state, and my hope is that now that we have a new gender minister, the things that we've forgotten, look, there are things that we remember to do. Social protection was one of them, and we are happy about that. But there are things that we forgot to do. Violence against women and girls is one of them. And I tell you, since we stopped talking, domestic violence is on the rise, sexual violence is on the rise, and the brutality of those acts are on the rise.
Where do you think we went wrong? Because this is not the first time we're seeing something like this. Where do you think we've gone wrong when it comes to the law?
I think that it's not ignorance of the law any longer. I mean, social media has cured us of a lot of ignorance, if you like. It's more to do with a society that thinks that people can do what they like and get away with it. Our institutions are weak or they are discriminatory. I mean, if something happens to somebody who is very important, the amount of attention that we will give to that is very different to somebody whom we think is not so important, okay? And this is where, for example, I'll talk about the Ghana Police Service. I mean, I have confidence in the Ghana Police. I was a prosecutor for a long time. When they want to crack a case, they will crack it. I believe Ghana Police is as good as any police anywhere. But there are times when we are worried because they consider that this particular case is of more importance or is of, you know, sometimes we get the feeling, especially those of us who work in civil society and in women's rights, that some of these things may not be taken with the seriousness with which we deserve. These, I mean, when it comes to violence against women, especially those that are coming out from the homes, for example, no matter how difficult the case is, the tendency is to invite the perpetrator. In other jurisdictions, you don't invite a perpetrator who is seen to have defiled or who is seen to have brutalized somebody in a home. You go and arrest them. But here in Ghana, we still keep inviting them, and they come at their will. And depending on whether somebody is interested in the case or not, you know, sometimes it may go in a certain way that you don't want. I know the police will crack this case if they mean to. This is pure CID action. Coupled with DOFSU or whoever else, we don't care. They should go on the ground. They should put on their plain clothes. They should go on the ground and crack this case. And indeed, and let Ghana be proud again of our police.
And indeed, talking about this, I must say that the police has actually issued a statement on this, yes, on this particular case. And I must admit again that we've been trying to reach Sir Fasatha since Friday. He hasn't responded to any of our calls. But I'll read the statement verbatim for you to get the details as well. And it says the police administration has observed with grave concern the resurgence of the menace of instant justice, whereby persons suspected to have committed criminal offenses are attacked by a mob and beaten or even lynched. One of such cases is an incident where a lady is alleged to have stolen something at Kejetia, Kumasi, and was caught stripped naked and brutally assaulted by a mob. Perpetrators of this unlawful and unfortunate practice are advised to desist from it and report all suspected criminals to the police for the necessary action. Persons who visit instant justice on suspected criminals may themselves be committing crimes such as assault and murder where the victim dies and are liable for prosecution. It goes on to say that it must be noted that no one is deemed guilty of any offense until so proven by a competent court of jurisdiction. Instant justice, and it lists it here, has no place in a democratic dispensation where rule of law operates. It says violates the rights of persons who fall victims to it. Also, usually results in situations where innocent people suffer injustice. And then the last point is often leads to accomplices in a crime escaping justice. The statement concludes by saying the police has commenced an exercise employing the use of modern technology, including cameras, to arrest and prosecute all persons who take the law into their own hands and exact instant justice. Members of the public who chance upon such scenes are also entreated to call the police on MTN Vodafone short codes and on all networks for prompt response. So you heard the details. Is this enough?
No.
Why do you think it's not enough?
It sounds strong, but to me it's not enough. This case should be singled out or put within the framework of violence against women and human rights and the responsibility of the police and thereby the responsibility of the state. The only reason why I'm saying this is that it is important to address all the issues of instant justice, but it would have been a stronger statement for the police to let the public understand that violence against women and the acts of violence against also constitute crimes. You know, there are times when we make this division in our minds that, you know, this is another woman and she's stealing and we can do what we like. Something like that happened at the mall, the Accra Mall, where young ladies were purported to have stolen. You know, they were made to kneel down, they were being beaten. For me, when you place emphasis on some of these things, then it brings the Ghanaian public's mind back to the fact that violence against women is seen as something that is serious and that also merits a certain kind of treatment. If you don't do that, it's too general, it's too, how do you call it? It's too general and it sometimes doesn't cut the ice that you are looking for. So I think that, you see, one of the things that we're realizing is that now when it comes to these issues, we have laws, we have more than enough laws, but it is time for the police to also take up the mantle of doing its bit in implementation, in enforcement, in education, together with other collaborators. We need to go back there.
It's been a week already since this incident happened. It happened on the 14th of February, and the police issued this statement I just gave you details of on the 16th. It's actually dated on the 16th. Do you think that the police, what do you expect the police to have done at this time, between this time?
Well, by now, I would have expected a few arrests. I would expect some more investigation into the matter. I would want to know where this woman is, who picked her up from the street. This should be given to us by public information. If they can't do it, they know where to find some of us to give us that information. Where is the woman? Was she taken to the hospital? Which clinical psychologist is seeing to her? All of these things, because they also know by training that they cannot do everything for this particular victim. You see, that's what also creates a little distinction among the crimes. It's multi-headed. And so you will need not just the victim, the hospital, you need a clinical psychologist, you need the social welfare or whoever should make sure that this woman is placed in a place of safety. A number of things need to happen, and we need to know that the police is heading the doing of all of these things until the crime is prosecuted.
And indeed, you also commented on the statement that this seems so general. They should have singled this thing out.
And I wasn't impressed.
They should have singled this thing out. Do you think that the police may not really be treating such cases as urgent as they would if probably the officer was shot?
That has always been my concern. And it isn't just when a police officer gets into trouble or is shot. It is a distinction that is made between crimes of, you know, the kind that we say, these are serious crimes, armed robbery, murders, and so on and so forth, and crimes that are seen as crimes against women. There's an improvement because of the existence of DOFSU and the kinds of trainings that we've had for the police. But often now and then they slip back to their old ways. And I think this is a good time to remind them, don't slip back to your own old ways. There was a time when a number of women from the cross-section of this public gave the police such a run for their money that they had to call us into conference, okay, to make sure that they are giving us the information we need. They don't want us to go back there. They don't want us to go back on the streets crying out for resignations and saying, start paying attention to gender crimes because we think you're not paying enough attention to gender crimes. We don't want to go back there. We've come too far. So it's important that they understand that there are eyes that are watching them, there are mouths that are ready to speak, and we are hoping that our new IGP, the acting IGP, whom I know is one of our crack police officers, should be up and doing.
Now,
We want to get information about this case. We want to have updates on what has happened on this case, and we want to see better action.
you talked about being a prosecutor for years before with the police service. What do you make of
With the Attorney
with the
General's
Attorney General? What do you make of this excuse, as it were, trying to find a better word, or the police saying that we are waiting for somebody to report before, you know, investigations and other things start? And for you, in what cases does the police need to even wait for this, or just pick up the case?
They don't need to have somebody to report a public crime like this. They know what kind of investigative processes to set in place and to ensure that they get people arrested and prosecuted. So really, in every instance, you know, when you go case by case, there are some cases where if it's hidden from the public view, as for example, something is happening in a home or in a particular part of a community, you need somebody to go and say that we have heard cries, we have heard this is going on, please make sure you go there and see what is going on. Then you need a complainant, then you need somebody to report. But with public crimes, you know, I mean, if I can just refer to this case that happened with the is it KTI?
KTI, yes.
I mean, that's public crime, right? They went the whole hog in trying to make sure that they got the students back in their place. However they did it, and by ways in which I hope I'm not hearing right, you know, they showed police force, not service, force, okay, from the reports I heard. Okay, now it means that when it comes to public crimes, nobody needs to come and report to you. You know what you can do, and you know how to make sure that you get your investigative procedures going so that you can crack crimes like this. Ghana police, they've cracked murders that people thought they couldn't do. That's why I'm saying I am confident in their abilities. And so if we don't get somebody arrested, we will not be happy.
And if you say you don't get somebody arrested, sometimes they say that it takes some time before they're able to get these people. What timeline would you expect the police to get some people to bring some people to book?
It's enough if you know that they're working and they're working very seriously. It's enough if you know that they're also not just using their police methods, but they are working in collaboration with the other organizations who should make sure this victim is safe. That is also an important part of the equation. So I won't give timelines, but we are hoping that in the next few days or whatever, we will get enough information about this case, and it sends a clear signal back to the Ghanaian public that violence against women and girls and children is still as serious a crime as any other crime. Those signals are important in our society because it does seem, unfortunately, sometimes most of the perpetrators are men. We don't want to do this thing, whether it's women and men, whatever it is. But it does seem that this idea of objectifying women's bodies it comes up very easily in people's minds. It's one thing to catch somebody and stone them to death. That's bad. That's very bad. But when you are sexually assaulting that person in public, it tells you the kind of mind you have about a woman and a woman's body. You are not only sexualizing that, but you are objectifying that body. And you are bringing it under such demeaning conditions that you are telling the rest of the world that you really do not respect women. And that is what is behind a crime like this. And that is what I think we should go for.
What do you think is the way forward?
Well, the way forward, I think, is to get our institutions back on track when it comes to violence against women, violence against children, violence against girls, violence against persons with disability. Those people that seem to be on the margins, we need to bring that thing back, okay? There was a period when we had a lot of talk about it. We wanted the domestic violence law passed, you know, so we were really up and doing all across the country on this. Now, you know, everybody is settled back into their usual professions and everything, you know, but we have institutions of state. And in these matters, you do a multi-pronged attack. You do prevention through education, through awareness raising, through sensitization, through modeling. For example, if this case is properly dealt with, it becomes a signal, it becomes a model that says that we are still up on our foot or on our feet on these matters. So the prevention part is important. The protection part, that is a part where the law comes in, where the law uses the rules and regulations to make sure people do not act with impunity. The provision part is also important. This woman will not just need the police to prosecute the perpetrators. She will need services. She will need shelter if, you know, in case there are people around who are just watching what is going to, whether she's going to be a witness. She will need protection services. She will need clinical psychological services. She would need a number of things. Finally, there's the prosecution part. This is where you're attacking impunity. And when they do this and they do it well, people then get to know that you can't think that this is just one of those other things. I can do it and get away with it. No.
And speaking of shelter, how is ACT Foundation doing? It's been a while.
Yes, well, we've run the shelter in Ghana as the lone shelter for 17 years. Very recently, we temporarily shut it down because of lack of funding. And so it's not been easy, but I think this is where the state needs to step up, because the state has facilities for shelters. And all they need to do is to ensure that they get some of us to train their workers, their social workers, and get into the shelters and work. People need shelter, and there is shelter in this country, except that they are not working.
You talked about shutting it down temporarily. Does it mean you haven't come back yet?
No, I haven't come back yet. Temporarily, because we have a client or two, but then we haven't come back full force, because you know, when you're sheltering people, you take care of their feeding, their clothing, their hospital needs, their resettlements, their rent costs, everything that comes along with taking care of a human being, body, soul, and spirit. You do it. And it's not easy, but I'm not the state. It is the state's responsibility under international human rights law, which it has signed up to all over the place. You know, Ghana, we like this thing. Yes, to make sure that shelters are provided as a way of protection and as a way of letting people know that you care about your citizens. So especially for the vulnerable women and girls, that shelter is provided, and all the services that go along with it will also be provided.
And talking about caring for citizens, today is the International Day of Social Justice. What would you say on a day like this? I mean, bearing in mind all these things going on.
Well, yeah. I mean, of all the things that I'm interested in this life, one of the key things is social justice. That's the framework within which I set work in women's empowerment, women's rights, and children's rights in. I think that it's a day that we need to pay attention to. You see, human beings, we are the human resource. Wherever justice is denied, or wherever issues around justice, people often think of justice as things to do with the law. No. Sometimes it's about social development. It's about reducing poverty. It's about making sure that the dignity, the welfare, and the rights of people are respected. So I think today is a day to be commemorated across board. And I think that we know that any country that pays attention to the rights and the welfare of the most vulnerable of its citizens shows that it's a country worth its salt. The Nordic countries have done very well. They've done it so well that they're able to use all the things that they get from the rich to ensure that people who are not so rich also come up to a certain level of minimum standards of life that they're able to do. I think Ghana has enough blessing to be able to get us there.
Thank you so much for joining us in the studio today. And you were just watching a discussion with me and lawyer Angela Dwamena. She's also the executive director of ACT Foundation, an NGO that caters for women and vulnerable children in society. And we're just talking about today being World Day of Social Justice. This day was instituted to encourage countries to support efforts of the international community in poverty eradication, the promotion of full employment and decent work, gender equity and access to social well-being and justice for all. The theme for this year is preventing conflict and sustaining peace through decent work. Earlier this morning, Mamavi Owusu-Abuaje had a chat with Joseph Wuthau. He is the commissioner for the Commission on Human Rights and Administrative Justice, and human rights lawyer Francis Xavier Susu. The conversation touched on where we are as a country and when it comes to advancing social justice and removing barriers that people face because of gender, age, race, ethnicity, religion, culture, or disability. Who do you think has access to justice in Ghana?
I think the Constitution guarantees justice for all Ghanaians, both the rich and the poor, the young and the old, the have and the have-nots, as we've come to know these terms. However, in practice, what I have realized over these few years of my legal practice is that it is only those who have the money who are able to afford justice in Ghana, because it's quite expensive accessing justice in Ghana. Secondly, it is those who come from homes, influential homes, people whose parents or uncles are politically connected, or have people in the corridors of power who can intervene when matters, or when things happen, to them. We have had situations in our court where you have members of parliament or some ministers of state personally come to court because this case concerns us, and perhaps it's just a defilement matter. It may be about some other person, maybe in some corner in Medina, and nobody really cares. We've had matters like that where the victims, are not protected because nobody follows up. We have tried in some few cases to hold watching brief for some of them, but quite frankly, how many can you do? We have a lot of complaints of them, but we are also constrained. So as much as we can do, we do. But there are many others who are out there who are not protected at all, and who don't have access to justice at all, because they do not have the money to afford lawyers, they don't have parents who are influential, and they don't have anybody who is politically connected to follow up their cases.
Mr. Whittal, that is the area where you should be failing, correct?
Exactly, and but let me just first acknowledge that Francis has actually hit the nail right on the head. But the question is, why should the motto of Ghana be freedom and justice, indicating that justice as a principle is something that Ghana puts up foremost? Why should access to justice by Ghanaian citizens become an issue? It means that we have misplaced our priorities. Justice should not be up for the highest bidder. It shouldn't be, as he has mentioned. It shouldn't be because of money. It shouldn't be. So we need, on the day of social justice, as we are celebrating, we need to begin to recall where are we going? If you cannot even give your people ordinary justice, and you have set up courts, you put judges, lawyers are making a living out of that, and the ordinary person cannot access justice, then there's a big issue. Of course, the commission fills in. We are also there. We have been put there by the Constitution directly to support the vulnerable. And from the numbers that we have, you'd see that we are also pulling our weight there. On the average, if you have about 13,000 cases coming to the commission nationwide, mostly from the vulnerable.
Are we talking monthly, yearly?
No, annually.
Okay.
13,000, and the throughput being about 10,000, 11,000 completed cases in a year, where there is no fee charged, where lawyers are not necessarily required, because we tend to become the lawyers, where the settlement process is made more friendly because it's informal, and we try to make sure that whatever disputes that people have brought, they should be able to go back and live their lives together again. And unfortunately, you are not able to get enough budgetary support for us to expand. Because we are in only 100 districts. We should be in all the districts as the Constitution allows. But there are some districts right now that are not served by us. So the question then is, where are we going? So if the costs are expensive, if the ordinary man cannot even pay for transport to come to court, and if he comes to court, he has to pay filing fees that is beyond his reach, then we have to begin to change our tack and begin to restore the institutions that can fall back and soak the heat.
Let me just, you said 13,000 cases come to you and you're able to solve 10,000 of...
Between 10 to 11,000 a year.
Okay, so
on the average.
Can you tell us, for instance, what are some of the cases that would come typically to Shraj? Apart from, the famous ones that we hear, there's somebody writing to the commission to investigate Parliament, for instance, for some bribery allegation.
Those are really those are not very critical to us. We are targeting the vulnerable. And because the vulnerable involve women, children, and the disabled, who are mostly in the rural countryside, most of the cases are about children, about women, and about ordinary disputes that, when solved, would make people live their lives and be more comfortable.
But we hardly hear of some of these cases.
Because you hardly come to church. We expect that journalists should show interest beyond the sensational cases such as the bribery allegations in Parliament. You should be interested in coming to find out how many cases of child abuse, human trafficking, maintenance, irresponsible parents not taking care of their children, school fees. Those are the human-centered issues that I think
But you
I
also don't
challenge you to come
publicize.
forward.
You also don't publicize your own works.
We do. We actually we send an annual report to Parliament every year. I admit that we are a bit behind time in terms of some number of reports that should have been in Parliament, but it's all about the money.
So right now you are heavily under-resourced.
That is true.
Okay,
Yeah.
we will come and talk about it, but let me talk to Francis now, because Francis has been involved in a lot of cases. What would you say? Some of the things that you take up could also be channeled through Shraj.
Yes.
Have you tried to collaborate with Shraj in the work that you've done?
I must say that, I mean, Shraj has been a very able partner in what we do. And I must commend Shraj for what they do, despite the kind of constraints under which they work. I mean, sometimes when I come to Shraj, I feel sad. I feel sad because this is the only constitutional ombudsman that we have in this country for now. This is the only constitutionally established body that is supposed to supervise all administrative institutions and all kinds of injustice perpetrated against people, including the social justice matters that the commissioner just talked about. But when you even come here, look at the compound of Shraj, look at the offices of Shraj. It's heavily under, resourced, and like you rightly said, we are actually violating the Constitution to the extent that we have not resourced Shraj to have offices in all the districts that we have in Ghana. Because then what it means is that people in those districts, do not have access to the only institution that is supposed to follow up and ensure and enforce their fundamental human rights. And over the years, we have most of the petitions that we do, either to Attorney General or to other institutions, we've always copied Shraj. And one of the most interesting and wonderful things we've always had is that whereas we would never, ever have any letter of acknowledgement from any of these institutions, Shraj will always write to you and say that we acknowledge receipt of your letter and we are taking steps on your letter.
However, we don't have money to do anything.
It's completely amazing to me because we've sent, petitions to either PIPS, we've sent petitions to IOCO, we've sent petitions to National Security, to the ministries and Attorney General, but nobody would ever acknowledge any receipt of any letter and even assure you that we are doing something about that. And I feel that is quite impressive. And quite apart from that, you would recall that in collaboration with Joy FM, we did a story on Christopher Bama, the 16-year-old boy who was brutally assaulted by some military men. This was a case we petitioned Shraj about. And I mean, to the credit of Shraj, unlike many other institutions, Shraj actually conducted investigation into this matter. I sat in a number of interviews with our clients and the many assurances that we have. Indeed, we are yet to receive that report, final report from Shraj, and we are looking forward to receive that report from Shraj. However, I believe that is something that, some work, positive work had been done on, and I think it is something that needs, to be commended. Even though we are really, in fact, we've actually written to Attorney General that if we do not receive the final report from Shraj and the state does not do anything about it, we would have no choice than to resort to the international, community court, because then Shraj being part of the national if you like, institutions, then we would construe the entire thing to be the state failing in its responsibility if we don't see anything done in respect of that matter. So I'm hopeful that even now that we have Mr. Uta here, we probably will even have some assurance that maybe this week we're receiving that report.
I was just going to say that Commissioner Whittle, maybe you have some updates.
Quickly, I would have even asked for a comment on that because to assure my good friend Susu and the people of Ghana, we have actually completed the investigation.
Wow.
The only thing required now is for the military high command to release the 2 or 3 military officers involved, for them at least to be given the natural justice right or opportunity to confront the findings of charge. And we've written to the military high command. We are waiting for that. And when that release is done, we'll wrap up the report within a week. Yeah.
Okay.
If we can have the military officers at least for 3 hours, we would issue the report.
How does that make you feel?
I mean, it makes me feel good, but it makes me also think that, you know, this is a matter that we believe that to some limited extent, the military high ranks have failed in their duty, or perhaps are seeking to protect their own. Because, I mean, it's not everything that you put on air, but I recall that when this matter happened, I've had a lot of, you know, anonymous calls that have actually asked that we do something. You know, in Ghana, when we say do something, that actually means, in other words, if you can cover up, if you can do something, if you can reduce what it would take. But we have just been determined that we are not going to let this matter die, because it happened to Christopher Obama. It can happen to any other person. And you know, in recent times, if you would watch, and I'm happy that on this day of social justice, we are having this conversation, that even in just past 2 weeks, there have been lots of issues of mob action, you know, lynching of people, brutality. People are being subjected to dehumanizing, you know, and treatment, degrading treatment, which violates our constitution. But nothing has been done about this. So I believe that this platform should serve as a notice to the CDI, is it the
CDS.
The CDS, yeah, Chief of Defense Staff, that he needs to do something about this. It's unacceptable. The people of Ghana wants to know what happened. So these military men must be released to Shraj, so that at least they can confront the piece of evidence against them, so that Shraj can release their final report for us to see how we end this matter.
This issue also brings to mind proactiveness of Shraj. Are you like a complaint center that people just have to walk in and complain before you take a certain action? Or once you hear some of these stories, even on our airwaves, then you can take an action on your own?
Well, I think the framers of the Constitution preferred a complaint-driven commission, at least for the mandates of human rights and the ombudsman. But for corruption, no. For corruption allegations, Shraj can on its own go ahead, investigate and issue a report. But when it comes to violations of fundamental human rights, administrative injustice, the constitution makers require a complaint from an identifiable complainant.
So even when you've heard and seen on television a story that people have lynched someone in Kumasi, for instance, you wait for somebody to come and formally make that complaint. Is there something that you would love as commissioner for it to change?
Certainly. It looks absurd, because why would a human rights activist see something happening and not be able to act just because there is a requirement for a complaint first from anybody to come? Looks absurd. But we are thinking that in the course of the constitution review processes, the opportunity will be given for that to be amended, because the Constitution Review Commission has actually recommended that charges, all the mandates of charge should not be triggered by the need for a complaint. So that is something we are looking forward to.
But this also brings to mind, as citizens, we also have some responsibilities to play. Sometimes we watch some of these things happen. How do we even begin to start the conversation of stopping?
Good. For me, before I even get to the citizenship, or the obligations of a citizen. Can we all agree that Article 12 of the Constitution, which Sosu relies on a lot, requires the judiciary, the legislature, all organs of state, every person in Ghana to respect the fundamental human rights of anybody? So it is not as if the matter needs to go to court or come to trial or go to any adjudicating body. It means by the constitutional fiat, you must ensure that when you are considering anything, you have the human rights dimension of that matter in mind. So to what extent are we all doing that? Decisions that are taken in the public services, do they consider the human rights ramifications or implications before they are done?
You're still watching News Desk on Joy News. Coming up next is Business with Emmanuel Abuajiri, and he'll be telling you the current rate of the cedi against the dollar, plus other stories. Don't go away.